Hey there guys, welcome to Meat Shop. Thanks for clicking on. In this video, I'm going to show you how to blend pork with your venison for making nice sausages, or if you want to just have some ground venison that's a little more mild, the family can enjoy. I'm going to show you how to do that in this video. So if you like it, give it a thumbs up and subscribe, but let's mix up some pork and venison. Hey there guys, so welcome to how to grind and blend pork in with your venison. This video is going to be a pretty short, simple video. I just basically want to give you the amounts and kind of how to roughly calculate what amount of pork you're going to need to what amount of venison for making sausage or burger. Just to have ground burger in the house that's got a little fat content, which is nicer for cooking. Adding a little bit of pork to your venison is what I usually recommend, especially if it's strong venison like a deer in the rut, or sometimes elk or bull moose in the rut can kind of really, their testosterone levels come up and whatnot, and they can be a little stronger tasting. So a little bit of pork helps bring up the moisture and tame down the wild game flavor. So I usually recommend it. Of course, you don't have to. You can do all these recipes and whatnot that on this YouTube channel without adding any pork. They are a lot leaner though. You have to watch them. If they're smoked products, they'll dry up quite a bit on you. But today we're going to be adding pork to our venison trim, which is supplied by Randy Pletz from North 49 Outdoors. They have a cool YouTube channel, hunters, bunch of cool hunting videos. They go up to the Northwest Territories, all over the place. But anyways, Randy Pletz dropped some of this stuff off here, and this is how venison trim should look. It's nice and lean, there's no fat, there's no hair, no blood clots. It's beautiful stuff. This is what you want to be making your venison sausage out of. Really lean, really clean. That silver skin and fat is kind of where the wild game flavor comes from. The fat of the animal kind of carries the deposits that the strong game flavor comes out of. So we trim all that off when we're doing deer. I do have a how to cut deer video somewhere. Maybe I'll link it down below. We take all that off. We take as much silver skin off as you can. You can't take it all off the calves and shanks. You would go insane. But this stuff here is beautiful venison trim. Nice and lean. You know, there's a little bit of silver skin stuff off the shank, but this will make great sausage. So that's the venison. That's how you kind of select it for making sausage and ground. How do you select your pork? How much pork to put in? Those questions here. So I usually recommend putting in 30% pork, but it really depends on what type of pork you're putting in. The most common stuff I probably guess you guys will use is pork butts or pork shoulders out of the supermarkets because they're relatively cheap and widely available. And I do have some here. If you put pork butts in at 30%, which is a ratio by the way, it's not 30% of this meat, it's 30% of your whole meat block. So if you're going to do 10 kgs, 22 pounds, you would put in well, that'd be 3 kgs of that would be pork, roughly 6.6 pounds. So that's kind of how we calculate when we're doing meat for sausage. It's not 30% of the venison weight, it's 30% of the whole weight. So when I say I'm putting it, I recommend putting in 30% of the whole weight. So if you're using pork butts, which is widely available, it's still going to work out really good. They're nice and fatty. They have kind of on average about 30% fat content once they're trimmed down to kind of about 1/4 or 3/8 of an inch fat cap. But if you're using these guys at 30% in the meat block, you're going to kind of wind up with a 10% fat ratio at the end. So for every kilogram, you're going to have 100 grams of fat, which is nice for smoked sausages. Little on the lean side, but it's still really nice. So you can totally use those at that ratio. 3 kgs in a 10 kg batch, or 6.6 pounds in a 22 pound batch. Now what I do like using for, and this will save you guys, this is a tip that will save you guys loads of money during your hunting season sausage making adventures, is to go find something that's a little bit fattier. I like to use pork loin trim or pork belly trim because it's about 50-50, 50% fat, 50% lean, and it's still really nice high quality trim. So when you get those pork loins in the grocery store, or you can buy pork bellies in the supermarket, they're perfectly square. So what they'll do in the shop is they'll cut that lead edge off and they'll cut the back edge off, and it's really fatty stuff. But for making venison sausage, it's perfect, it's good quality trim. Same with the loin. That loin, that main muscle that comes out of the vac pack bags, you maybe seen them at Costco, supermarkets, wholesale clubs, whatever. They have to peel the cap and that tail off. If you think of a ribeye, that tail meat with the little bits of meat and fat going through it is what this trim is. It's still really nice stuff. It's still subcutaneous fat, which is some of the best fat for making sausage. Intermuscular fat that you get out of the pork butt is also really good. But some of this stuff here, like, I'll show you, like it's pretty fatty stuff. You wouldn't want to make straight sausage out of that. It'd be pretty well 50-50 fat. But it works perfect for this venison sausage. So like I said, it works perfect for this venison sausage. And the nice part about this stuff, it's about half the price of the pork butts. So at this time up in Canada, pork butts are like $6 a kg or $3.25 a pound. This stuff is about half that price and it works awesome. So I use that stuff at 30% as well. It'll have a little more fat content, a little bit more moisture. It's still going to tame the wild game down the same. Now, if your family's not really big on wild game flavors, I would use pork butts at 50-50. Because then you're going to have more pork, a little bit more leaner pork in there. You're still going to have a nice fat content, and it's going to mild it right out. You're hardly going to know you're eating wild game sausages. So hopefully that makes sense. I use 30% pork as a ratio of the whole meat block to 70% wild meat. And I use either kind of pork belly trim or pork loin trim. And if you want a little bit on the leaner side, you can use pork butts. Now, we're going to run it through the grinder. I usually run it, if you're doing this little guy, run it through a larger plate like so. So I run it through on the first grind on a 3/8 plate, which is about 10 millimeters. And then after it's gone through once, you switch it out to this plate here, a much finer plate, which is about 3 or 4 millimeters, 3/8 plate, or sorry, 1/8 plate for the final grind, 1/8, 3 millimeters. It really takes away any toughness from the meat. You know, you're not chewing on any gristle when you go to that fine grind. It's not overly fine. It's kind of like what you get in retail grocery stores. But that's another reason to clean up a bunch of the silver skin. Silver skin's tough on your grinder. It has a hard time kicking it through. That's why I start with the larger plate. Your grinder will be able to send it through with less resistance if it does run into some silver skin. And then those parts of meat or first ground meat will be in smaller chunks, and then it can go through a smaller grinder plate, making it easier on your grinder. You'll have no smearing, hopefully, and whatnot. A couple tips to avoid smearing. I'll show you guys here. Tip number one is I keep my plates and blades together. See, I have them tied together here. So that blade stays with this plate, and this plate stays with this blade, because they will form grooves on one another as they rotate. And if you switch blades up, they'll kind of scar the backside of that plate. Of course, another tip which I've mentioned about twice already is to take the silver skin off as much as possible. That will reduce smearing, and have the meat cold. This stuff here is pretty well semi-frozen. Some of these blocks here, I kind of chopped it up this morning during work. They're a little bit thawed out now, but you can pop it in the freezer and frost them up a little bit. You don't want to freeze them rock solid, otherwise it might be a little hard on your grinder. And then you can run them through. Another thing, another little tip for you, is on your grinder, when you put this plate in, you want to make sure that your plate is good and tight against your worm or casing for the auger. If it's loose, meat will start to kind of smear around the outside edge here and come out and fill up, and there'll be just a little bit of space between your blade and your plate. The contact between the plate and the blade is what makes the cutting surface. That tightness is important. So make sure you put the nut on your grinder nice and firmly. That will prevent any wiggle space between the plate and the blade. So we're just going to grind this stuff up. I have 22 pounds here. I'm going to grind in 9.5 pounds of pork. So that's 10 kgs and 4.2 kgs. But you could totally do that with this. I do have my big grinder back here, which I'm going to use instead because it's going to be a lot quicker and save me a little bit of extra cleanup instead of getting 2 grinders dirty. So, but otherwise, you would just use this little guy. Run it all through here once, maybe pop it back in the freezer if it gets too warm, and run it through the 3mm 1/8 plate for your final grind. We'll do that on the big grinder now. Okay there guys, so I'm going to do the same thing on this big grinder for demonstration's sake. I have a big 3/8 plate I'll go through on the first grind, and then a finer 3 to 4 millimeter 1/8 plate for the final grind. I don't need to with this big one. This is 7.5 horsepower, but we will do it for comparison's sake. Okay guys, one last little look at the pork here. Nice fat content, a little bit higher fat content than normal sausage making stuff. In goes our pork and Randy's venison. Now if you're doing this on your own, you can mix it up by hand before you start running it through your grinder so that it's coming out more dispersed. But this thing has a mixer on it, so it will do that on its own. Okay, there she is. So there we go. First grind, you can see the pork starting to get kind of dispersed in there. Looks like a nice fat ratio, fat content. And we'll stick it back in and run it through that 3 millimeter plate for the final grind. And again, it'll mix one more time in the hopper here as it goes through. But you could toss it around a little bit. If you're doing it in the hand grinder at this point, then it'd be perfectly evenly distributed. Put that nut on tight, same with the little grinder. Final ground for some venison ground. All right, it's gonna look a lot like ground beef at this point. Take the first little handful, throw it back in the grinder. There we go. Now you can hardly tell the difference between that and ground beef at this point. So, looks really good. A little bit of fat dispersed throughout all of that. Looks good, it'll make beautiful smoked sausage, or it will make beautiful ground meat at this point in time too. You could mix that up into casseroles and your regular ground beef dishes, and you wouldn't hardly know you're eating venison. There we go, that's the very end of it guys. Voila, lean, beautiful venison meat mixed with some pork. So that's basically it guys. We have some nice venison meat here that we're gonna work with, make a couple different venison sausages for you. But like I said, you could cook with this today. Okay guys, I just want to show you that ratio calculation real quick, and it's going to wrap up this video. Just so you know, you don't have to use an even round number. It's not like you got to get 10 pounds and you got to mix this amount of pork. You can just use 30% of your meat block as pork. So how would you figure that out? Well, first you could just cut up your venison, see how many pounds you have. It works in pounds and or kilograms. So let's say you cut up a whole deer, and you want to put it all into sausage. And you wound up with 82 pounds. So 82 pounds, that's your lean meat. That's going to be 70%. And you want to figure out how much 30% is going to be. So you just do this, it's a simple ratio calculation. You take 30, multiply it by 82, divide it by 70, and that's going to give you, damn pen, that's going to give you the weight of the pork you're going to put in to get you 30% as a ratio. So it works in pounds or kilograms. 82 pounds of lean venison meat times 30%, or sorry, 30% times 82 pounds of lean venison meat gives you 2,460. You take that, divide it by 70, and you're going to put in 35 pounds of pork to your 82 pounds of venison. So you just take whatever weight it is, any weight, 72 pounds, that's your venison. You want it to be 70%, 30% pork. You can always do more pork too if you want, so you go 30 times 72 divided by 70 to get your weight. But if you wanted more pork because your family doesn't like pork or venison flavor, you can bump this up. But that means you have to take this one down. So if you wanted 40% pork, your weight would only be 60%. Your ratio of venison would only be 60%, so it would be 40 times 72 pounds of venison meat divided by 60% would give you your pork, which would be 48 pounds. You would put 48 pounds in if you wanted some nice mild venison sausage. So I hope that makes sense. You guys seen the burger there? It's nice and beautiful looking, perfect for sausage making. And we'll use that in the next couple videos on how to make venison sausage. That's what I do in the shop. It works great. We get loads of good reviews, and I hope you're looking forward to the next couple venison sausage videos. If this is helpful, give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and if there's anything I kind of missed in this or isn't clear, leave me a comment and I'll try and pin the answer to the top of the comments for you guys. Thanks for watching. Look forward to some venison sausage.